Tonight, Democrats fight to take control of the Senate.
I believe that we'll win on Tuesday because of the grassroots momentum.
We're on the ground with the latest on the Georgia Senate runoff elections and what they mean for the balance of power here in Washington. And
all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes.
A newly released phone call shows President Trump has not given up his fight over election fraud. Plus, the push to vaccinate Americans from the coronavirus.
We've seen a very rapid uptake just in the last 72 hours.
Can the country get back on track to reach vaccination goals in the new year? All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. The stage is set for an election showdown in Georgia. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Juss.
And I'm Tara Mergener. 4 candidates, 2 elections at stake, the balance of power of the United States Senate.
That's right, Tara. Tomorrow, voters in the Peach State will decide who next will represent them in the upper chamber on Capitol Hill. And Republicans hope they can capture enough votes to hold on to their majority.
CBN's Eric Phillips is in Georgia now covering the final push by the campaigns. Eric, on the eve of the election, how are things looking for each candidate?
Well, things are looking busy, Tara, for all 4 candidates. All of them have been crisscrossing the state over the last few days, specifically building up to Tuesday, Election Day. But consider this. The margin between these candidates is so slim. In most cases, we're talking about 1 or 2 percentage points. So they know that it's extremely important to get out the vote as much as possible, because the bottom line is whoever can get out the most voters will probably win this race. So things are looking very busy right now in these final hours.
Eric, these have been big money, high-profile campaigns, and one day out is no exception. Who is out campaigning today on both sides?
Well, you've got what you would call the heavy hitters campaigning on both sides right now. You had Kamala Harris, vice president-elect in Savannah, Georgia, last night. Today you have both President Trump and President-elect Biden, who will be here in Georgia. Trump will be in Dalton later on this evening. Biden plans to be in Atlanta today. And then a little bit earlier today in Milner, Georgia, you had a visit from Vice President Pence. And here's what he had to say there.
As we work to defend the majority, I just encourage you to pray for the future of this state and this nation. And when you pray, pray with confidence in those ancient words that Americans have clung to in much more challenging times than we could possibly imagine. That if his people who are called by his name will humble themselves and pray and turn, that he'll do like he's always done in the long and storied history of this country. He'll hear from heaven and he'll heal this land.
And of course, Pence appealing to all voters, but specifically Christian voters, invoking scripture there. And really, that's something that we've seen across the board on both sides. These candidates, John and Tara, know that it is important to appeal to the Christian voters because they make up a large block of the electorate, and no side, no candidate can win without tapping into that particular electorate.
Eric, something else that we've seen is a big push for early voting ahead of tomorrow's vote. How does that factor in?
Well, I think it plays a big role in this election. We're talking about for a runoff election. This is not even a general presidential election, which happened back on November 3rd, and of course is still in contention. But this is a runoff election. And consider this, 3 million, more than 3 million Georgians voted early in this runoff election. And so we're not even talking about the absentee ballots that have been received and yet to be counted. We're just talking about those voters who voted in person early. This is an election with a lot of interest, everyone realizing there's a lot at stake. So yes, we've seen millions of people voting early, and we're expecting to see a large turnout and great participation on Election Day tomorrow.
Eric, you've been talking to voters on the ground. What are the key issues to them in these elections?
I think it depends on who you talk to, Tara. If you're talking to evangelicals, for example, they're going to say that the life issue is a huge issue for them in this election, and that Israeli sovereignty is a huge issue. If you talk to some who might be on the left, perhaps some Democratic voters, they're going to tell you that the pandemic is a huge issue for them, and that education and student debt and healthcare, that all of those things rank top for them. But as we've been talking to folks just on the ground about tomorrow being election day and what that means, one thing we've definitely gotten a sense is that everyone understands that this election is important, that there's a lot on the line. I asked several of them, do you think that the media has overblown this? Do you think that too much of a deal has been made of this runoff election? And not one person that I asked that question to said yes. All of them said no. This is an important election. It's important not only to the state of Georgia, but to the country, and they're looking forward to it. Many of them had already voted at this point.
All right, CBN's Eric Phillips in Georgia. Thank you so much, Eric.
Well, newly leaked audio shows President Trump pressuring the Georgia Secretary of State to continue an election fraud fight on the president's behalf, though counts and recounts show Biden actually won the state. On the call with Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, the president insists he was cheated out of a victory.
If we could just go over some of the numbers, I think it's pretty clear that we won. We won very substantially, Georgia. We have at least two or three, anywhere from 250 to 300,000 ballots were dropped mysteriously into the rolls.
Well, despite President Trump's claims of voter fraud, Congress appears on track to certify the 2020 presidential election just 2 days from now.
That is, unless there's enough Republican lawmakers who can successfully challenge the results during Wednesday's joint session. CBN White House correspondent Ben Kennedy joining us now with the latest count.
Well, Tara, John, about a dozen Republican senators led by Ted Cruz and around 140 House members say they will oppose certifying the Electoral College vote. The big question now remains is which or what role might Vice President Mike Pence play?
We ought to have a fair inquiry, a fair audit into these results, and we ought to resolve these claims, not just dismiss them out of hand.
The fact of the matter is that we have an unsustainable state of affairs in this country where we have tens of millions of people that do not view this election result as legitimate.
Vice President Mike Pence's chief of staff issued a statement in part saying Pence shares the concerns of millions of Americans about voter fraud and irregularities in the last election, and welcomes the efforts of members of the House and Senate to raise objections and bring forward evidence before Congress and the American people on January 6th.
You have Trump supporters that are angry, as you know, and it's an angry cauldron that is going to be inflamed even more because there's going to be a debate. Now we know for sure, Pat, there's going to be a debate in the House and the Senate. We know we already have over 140 U.S. congressmen that are going to object on January 6th to these electoral votes. And now you have 13 senators and probably more by the time Wednesday, January 6th gets around.
Senator Lindsey Graham tweeted, proposing a commission at this late date, which has zero chance of becoming reality, is not effectively fighting for President Trump. It appears to be more of a political dodge than an effective remedy. GOP Senators Lisa Murkowski, Liz Cheney, Mitt Romney, Pat Toomey, and Tom Cotton said they intend to certify the election results. This, as a leaked phone call shows President Trump pressuring Georgia's top election official to find votes to overturn Biden's win in the state.
All I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
Georgia's Secretary of State telling ABC News today that Trump is misinformed and the election was fair.
He did most of the talking, we did most of the listening, but I did want to make my points that the data that he has is just plain wrong.
Now, Biden's team says this recording is proof that Trump is trying to overturn the election by, quote, pressuring and threatening an election official. And as Eric was just mentioning, in Georgia, President Trump is in that state tonight. He is there to campaign for the two Republican Senate candidates. John, Tara?
All right, CBN White House correspondent Ben Kennedy. Thanks so much, Ben. Well, Hans von Spakovsky is a senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation, and he joins us now for more. Hans, Happy New Year. First off, can you help us and set the stage by describing what Wednesday will look like when Congress meets to formally count the votes cast by the Electoral College?
Sure. They'll be holding a joint session. It's administered by the vice president. They open up the Electoral College vote certifications from each state, and they count the votes. The statute that governs this says that if a senator and a representative file a written objection to the certification from a particular state, well, then the joint session temporarily breaks up. The House goes to its chamber, the Senate goes to its chamber, and there they debate and vote on whether that objection should be sustained or overruled. And then the joint session resumes, depending on what the results of that are.
Senator Lindsey Graham is one of many not supporting Republican colleagues and opposing the certification of the results, saying it establishes unwise precedent. Do you agree?
Well, what I'd say about that is, look, it's really up to Congress to be the final judge on the certifications from the states. It depends on how much evidence and how much certain evidence they have of potential problems that raise questions about the outcome of the election in each state. If there isn't sufficient evidence for that, well, then those objections are going to be overruled and they're not going to be sustained.
Hans, looking at the numbers, most concede that this won't change the outcome in the Senate or particularly in the House, where Democrats have the majority advantage. So what's the point?
Well, I think one of the things that needs to come out of this election, no matter what the final result is state legislatures all over the country, particularly in places like Pennsylvania and Georgia, understanding that there are big holes and big vulnerabilities in our election system. And when their legislatures start up at the beginning of this year, they need to fix those problems. And they need to put in reforms that make sure that we don't have these problems again, and we don't have the public questioning the outcome of an election.
Hans, thank you so much for your insights.
Thanks, Hans.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Well, for another 2 years, Nancy Pelosi will keep the gavel as Speaker of the House. The California Democrat was reelected to the role Sunday, although a handful of her caucus members did not back her. This marks Pelosi's fourth term as House Speaker.
Joining us now is Chief Political Analyst David Brody. David, there was some talk about whether Pelosi would be Speaker again. She was narrowly elected, with all but 5 Democrats voting in her favor, though there was some Democratic grumbling about her longevity. But nobody stepped forward on the Democratic side to challenge her. Why?
Because she's powerful. I mean, that's the answer. I mean, she's been around a long time, probably since Reconstruction. I don't know. I haven't done the math. But look, ultimately, when you have power, that's where the gravitational force pulls. And so as much as we hear about AOC and the squad and the progressives and there's more women in Congress and, you know, yada, 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 good for all of them. The bottom line is Nancy Pelosi stirs the drink. She's the one that takes care of it all. And they know where their bread is buttered, if you will. And that's the reason.
David, speaking of power and gravity, let's now turn to that extraordinary call between President Trump and Georgia's Secretary of State. Democrats are calling for hearings and for the FBI to investigate what's been characterized as a solicitation of election fraud. David, clearly the president is not giving up. How likely is any of this going to change the election outcome?
No, it's not going to change any of the outcome whatsoever. I was speaking to Alan Dershowitz just about an hour or two ago. And so don't take my word for it. Listen to Dershowitz, who says, give me a break, that the media is making a big deal about this call, and it was nothing, that the president didn't ask or solicit for any votes whatsoever. He was doing, if you listen to the whole context of the call, he was obviously, this is Dershowitz talking, not me. I'm just telling you what he told me. But he's saying that the president is doing what the president has been doing for months and months, saying, where are the votes? Where are the legal votes that should be for me and not for my opponent? And so was it, could it have been said maybe a bit differently? Sure. But you know what? Donald Trump, one thing about Donald Trump, here's one predictable thing about Donald Trump. He's unpredictable.
Very true.
David, congressional Republicans defend the call, saying it simply reflects the president's enormous frustration. They'll be taking up his cause later this week, preparing to vote against the certified state results. What do you anticipate on Wednesday?
Well, there's going to be a lot of anger. It's going to be, I was on the 700 Club this morning talking about an angry cauldron in the streets on January 6th. I'm concerned about violence. I got to be honest with you. But there's also going to be anger in the halls of Congress. And, you know, Donald Trump has been wanting this fight in court, and he never got it. But he will get his day in court, if you will, in the halls of Congress. It's going to happen, guys. And he's going to be able to get a couple of hours in the House, a couple hours in the Senate to make his case. He won't be the one doing it, but he'll have people on his behalf doing it. And that's what's going to happen. And you know, I think we get law. You asked Hans von Spakovsky, I hope I got that right, earlier on about what's the point. Well, the point is very simple. This started as, you know, can Donald Trump save his presidency? And it's morphed. That's no longer the issue. The issue is fairness and election integrity and getting to the truth. And the concern is that if state legislatures are not able to make election laws, in other words, there have been elected officials, attorney generals, governors, state and local officials that are making these laws, not the state legislature, which is part of the Constitution. If that happens now and no one stands up and says anything, then the problem will continue in the future. And I think that's what the fight is about, election integrity.
David, you mentioned the possibility of violence. That is something that's very real. We're all hoping and praying that that does not happen. David Brody, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, you bet.
Well, a new year, a new big push to get people inoculated. More on the vaccine rollout across America when Faith Nation returns.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug-of-war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
The holiday rush sparked some of the busiest days of air travel since the pandemic began, with about 1.2 million people in America's airports on Saturday. And that is causing a growing fear of a post-holiday spike in coronavirus cases as we kick off the new year.
There is a bright spot, though, in the fight against the outbreak. Hope for a cheaper and easier way to store vaccine. Faith Nation anchor Jenna Browder has the latest.
Tonight, crowded hospitals are preparing for a new wave of cases. This as the holiday travel season winds down and more people start developing symptoms.
We're averaging 2,000 to 3,000 deaths per day. When an event occurs like the Christmas and New Year's holiday, you usually have a couple of week lag before you see an additional uptick of cases, which is always followed by hospitalizations and deaths.
To date, more than 20 million Americans have tested positive for COVID-19, with some 350,000 deaths blamed on the virus. Add to those numbers an uptick in holiday travel, with airlines seeing more than 14 million passengers in the past 2 weeks. COVID hospitalizations reaching 100,000 for more than a month now.
What's happening in Los Angeles can and will be coming to many communities across America.
In LA, the Army Corps of Engineers is stepping up to help hospitals running low on oxygen. And at this San Jose hospital, 43 staffers have tested positive. Across the country, a second emergency field hospital opened today near Boston.
This is going to be an exclusively COVID positive place.
Meanwhile, a new vaccine is offering some hope and gaining praise for being cheaper and easier to store. Oxford's vaccine is now being distributed in the UK. Stateside, the rollout of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines continues at a slower than expected pace. This weekend, cities like Houston holding some of the first public vaccine events. 250,000 people calling the health department for only 750 appointments.
I just want to get back to normal. I want to see my kids. I want to go back to work.
Operation Warp Speed officials are now considering giving out half doses of the Moderna vaccine to double the supply of shots.
We know it induces identical immune response.
Dr. Monsef Slaoui explaining there's evidence that 2 half doses in those between the ages of 18 and 55 is just as effective as a full dose. The FDA will have the final say on that. And for what it's worth, Dr. Fauci has warned against stretching the vaccines. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
All right, welcome back. North Carolina is seeing record high coronavirus hospitalizations. The Christian humanitarian group Samaritan's Purse is setting up a field hospital there to try and relieve some of the pressure. The 10-tent, 30-bed facility is being built in a parking lot next to the emergency room at Caldwell UNC Healthcare in Lenoir County. The site will serve COVID patients from 5 different health systems in the state. This isn't the first time the Franklin Graham Group led and has set up field hospitals. During the pandemic, Samaritan's Purse has also been on the ground in Italy and New York City.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
Administering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to cbnnewschannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Well, welcome back. Sunday marked 1 year since the killing of Iran's General Kassam Suleimani, and the Islamic Republic's leaders are vowing revenge, including threats against President Trump. One Israeli publication quoting Iranian President Hassan Rouhani saying Trump is, quote, nearing the end of his life. In a recent cabinet meeting, Rouhani compared Trump to former Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein, who was executed in 2006. Rouhani said Trump could face a similar end.
We saw the madman hanged. That was the day when the people celebrated their final historic victory. Trump's fate will not be much better than Saddam's.
Meanwhile, Iran informed the United Nations that it will begin enriching uranium to 20% at its facility in Fordo. That puts Iran one step away from creating weapons-grade uranium. A decade ago, Iran's decision to pursue that percentage of enrichment nearly provoked an Israeli strike on its nuclear facilities.
All right, on a lighter note, one man's trash, one herd of goats, treasure. Don't throw away that Christmas tree just yet. We'll show you a unique way to recycle when we come back.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5 Wednesday night at 9:30.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
I am Regent's first ROTC graduate student.
Well, welcome back. Tara, have you taken down your Christmas tree yet?
I have not. I'm so slow.
Well, if you haven't, here's the story for you. Already packed away those Christmas decorations, you may be wondering what to do with your used Christmas tree.
At least a real Christmas tree. One Massachusetts farm has the answer. Instead of throwing them away, well, feed them to the goats. Well, you and I might prefer some chocolate, John, or some cheese. For Nigerian dwarf goats, Christmas tree branches are the ultimate snack. Yum, yum. And at Chanel Homestead Family Tree Farm in Massachusetts, the goats are having their fill. The farm is helping the community recycle trees by taking them, making sure to remove all extra tinsel, of course, and lights, and then letting the animals snack away. John, what do you think?
That's recycling the Christmas spirit for sure.
We'll see you. Have a great night.
Happy New Year.